conflict is the crucible of change. Since early December, Houthi rebels have strangled one of the most strategic ocean waterways for international trade. Vessels have been boarded, missiles have been fired, and drones have been deployed. Simultaneously, the navies of the world, including the US Navy, have been slow to react. As a result, global maritime trade has been severely disrupted. The world's largest container shipping companies have stopped shipments through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. The US Navy has moved a carrier strike group from the Persian Gulf into the Gulf of Aden. At the same time, a new 10-country naval task force is being set up to protect shipping in the region, but the Americans don't want to get tied up in the Yemeni proxy conflict. Still worse, the neighboring powers have inconsistent interests. Egypt's economy is in pain, Iran is looking for new leverage, Saudi Arabia has a ceasefire with the Houthis, China is gloating to see the US Navy stretched thinly, and the UAE wants to escalate things but doesn't want to get its hands dirty. Broadly speaking, the Red Sea is a confluence of geography, economics, technology, and geopolitics. The Houthis have now declared American ships as targets and are looking to use force, but they're poking the hornet's nest. The last thing you want to do is threaten the US Navy with a good time. Today's video is sponsored by Conflict of Nations, a free online strategy game where you choose a real country to lead into a modern global conflict. Up to 128 other players are moving their units across the map in real time. So to win, you need to form alliances and construct all types of units, including tanks, jets, and submarines. Conflict of Nations is a huge game. It can take weeks for a game round to complete, which makes logistics as necessary as tactics. The key to victory is to think ahead and build alliances. What I like most about the game is that you can play with the same account on both PC and mobile. That convenience sets it apart from other games. Using our link below, you will get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold, and 1 month of premium subscription for free. The offer is only available for 30 days, so get started sooner than later. For the global economy to prosper, trade must go uninterrupted. Around 80% of international trade goes by sea, and ships must reach their ports as expeditiously and as cost-effectively as possible. However, ships are most vulnerable when passing through narrow passages. The Red Sea is one such passage. It is defined by 2 choke points, the Suez Canal to the north and the Bab al-Mandab Strait to the south. About 12% of global trade goes by this route, accounting for about 20% of international container traffic. Also noteworthy, roughly 10% of the world's maritime oil and 8% of liquefied natural gas is shipped through the same route. However, Houthi rebels from Yemen have put a stop to that by using missiles, drones, and fast attack ships. At its narrowest point, the Bab al-Mandab Strait is about 29 kilometers wide, and that is where the raids have taken place. So far, the Houthis have directly targeted at least 12 commercial vessels transiting the region, firing over 100 drones and missiles at ships from more than a dozen countries. The Houthis, who are backed by Iran, say the attacks are in solidarity with the Palestinians. But the maritime blockade is also a geopolitical leverage for Iran vis-à-vis America and Israel. For added context, Iran's other proxy, Hezbollah, has at least 130,000 rockets and missiles aimed at Israel. But Iran cannot employ Hezbollah's firepower to attack Israel, since doing so would open Pandora's box and result in the American bombardment of Iran. Therefore, instead of Hezbollah, Iran has chosen to retaliate by other means. The Red Sea is a place where the Iranians have gained substantial power in recent years owing to the Houthis. So, this is as close to the game of geopolitical chess as it gets. Regardless of the strategic maneuvering, the Houthi attacks are an affront to the freedom of navigation and compel economic powerhouses to reconsider global supply chains. In response to the maritime blockade, 4 of the world's 5 largest container shipping companies have suspended shipping through the Red Sea. These include Denmark's Maersk, France's CMA CGM, Germany's Hapang-Lloyd, and Switzerland's MSC. Together, these companies account for more than 50% of global container shipping capacity. Multinational British Petroleum is stopping shipments through the Red Sea as well. If other energy firms join the call, oil and gas supplies could be in severe trouble. Container ships making runs between Europe and Asia are getting reacquainted with the Cape of Good Hope, which had been largely obsolete since the opening of the Suez Canal more than 150 years ago. However, this detour adds about 7,400 kilometers and up to 14 days of travel time to the journey, costing millions of dollars in extra fuel and other insurance and auxiliary costs. Since the start of the crisis, the US Navy has moved the Dwight D. Eisenhower-led aircraft carrier and its task force into the Gulf of Aden. Now, Washington is mustering an international armada to reassure shipping companies and deter the Houthi blockade. But universal commitment is brittle. Britain has agreed to deploy ships, but France, Italy, and Spain have rejected the operation. Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates are also notably absent. China, which has warships in its base in Djibouti, is not part of the coalition either. What is left is not much of a task force. Each party has its own motives for rejecting the US-led operation. One of the reasons is the costs. Western naval forces use highly expensive equipment to fend off cheap drones. The French recently fired an Aster 15 surface-to-air missile worth more than $1 million to shoot down a Shahed-type drone costing barely $20,000. That is not a sustainable way of combat. When you employ $1 million weapon to kill a budget drone, it's really the budget drone that makes the kill. In sum, Western navies were not designed to repel the type of threat posed by the Houthis. Then again, a drone damaging a commercial ship would cost just as much as $1 million weapon. So there are considerations from all angles, and that's what makes this battle space so complicated. Overall, America's naval task force, dubbed Operation Prosperity Guardian, will increase security near the Bab al-Mandab Strait as it escorts ships through the region. But that's still not good enough for commercial enterprises. Escorting vessels through a narrow passage would bring forth logistical complications and dangers. This is because joining a convoy would require ships to congregate in the Red Sea or the Arabian Sea, which would make them easier targets for the Houthis. Though relatively small, the Houthis possess formidable and cheaply manufactured anti-ship ballistic missiles capable of flying 1,400 kilometers. These types of missiles travel at higher altitudes and greater speeds than cruise missiles and therefore extend the range at which the Houthis can strike ships. As such, flocking commercial ships into one space would make them an easy target, like shooting ducks in a barrel. Moreover, the shipping industry is currently still reeling from the COVID-19 breakdown in logistics. As a result, insurance costs for shipping in the Red Sea have jumped from 0.07% of a ship's value to as much as 0.7%. That is a tenfold increase in just 1 month. Plus, considering that oil tankers are valued in the hundreds of millions of dollars, this increase in insurance premiums makes shipping in the Red Sea exceedingly expensive. For instance, a tanker valued at $130 million will have an insurance premium of $910,000, whereas before it was $91,000. That is a steep climb, to put it nicely. So instead, shipping giants are considering going around the southern coast of Africa, even if that route is longer. This workaround is simply deemed more practical and cost-effective than risk damage through the convoy. To reassure shipping giants and restore maritime security, the Biden administration is considering more extensive military operations against Houthi targets on the mainland. However, doing so would come at the expense of power projection elsewhere. China and Russia in particular would watch the conflict unfold gleefully. To put things into perspective, the Houthis are a minority Shia Muslim sect in northern Yemen. They first emerged as a rebel group fighting the federal government in the 1990s. However, following the Arab Spring protests in 2012, Yemen's federal government was overthrown. The Houthis received substantial funding and weaponry from Iran and moved swiftly to consolidate their newfound power. Since 2014, they've controlled the capital, Sana'a, but are generally not recognized by the international community as Yemen's legitimate government. Regardless, the Houthis control an estimated 1/3 of Yemen's territory and about 70% of its population. Much of the international community paid little attention to the conflict in Yemen, and now it's about to get a reality check. Egypt's cash-strapped government will likely feel the brunt of the economic burden. It earns nearly $10 billion annually from transit fees passing through the Suez Canal. With the Houthi blockade in effect, maritime traffic along the Suez Canal has likewise come to a halt. This hurts Egypt's economic stability and possibly its political stability. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is noticeably absent from the ongoing crisis. The Saudis have been combating the Houthis since 2015, but as the rebel armaments have gotten louder and stronger, the Saudis have backed down from the fight. Equally important, the Saudis are resentful towards the Americans for their half-hearted response to the Houthi attacks on Saudi oil facilities. In reply, the Saudi leadership has hosted numerous rounds of peace talks with their Houthi counterparts as they look to detach themselves from the Yemeni battle space. So this time around, the Saudis figure they're going to be spectators instead. On the other end of the peninsula, the United Arab Emirates supports a different faction in the Yemeni conflict. And since the Houthis are located at a comfortable distance, the Emiratis still consider Yemen as available real estate and are ready to fight for it. They just don't want to do the fighting part. Instead, Emirati agents are lobbying lawmakers in Washington to greenlight American military actions against Houthi facilities and bases. All is fair in business and war. Overall, though, international maritime trade is a profoundly complex web. The Houthi blockade comes at a time when the European economies have moved away from Russian oil and gas and instead increased their seaborne energy imports, much of it coming from the Middle East and passing through the Red Sea. So, the longer the Houthi blockade lasts, the more severe consequences there will be for Europe and the commitments in Ukraine. So far, America's International Naval Task Force has left the Houthis undeterred, if only because of their physical distance from the fight and backing from Iran. In all good chance, the Houthis will continue their attacks so long as there is no significant blowback. In fact, the Houthis may feel empowered since the blockade has strengthened their geopolitical hand. The Houthis and Iranians know that the United States doesn't want to get dragged into the Yemeni proxy conflict. The Houthis have a decentralized structure. There is no single target or asset that could degrade their capacity for warfare. So, fighting the Houthis would be an extended operation with no end in sight. That's not something the Americans crave at this point in time, if only because Russia and China are more urgent priorities and the United States will need all its strength to keep those two at bay. However, things could quickly turn around if a Houthi attack results in American casualties. Biden would be forced to take severe retaliatory measures, carrying unintended and unpredictable consequences. But even short of that, the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea risk wrecking the global economy if left unaddressed. The key to this crisis is Iran, and it always has been. The Houthi funding, weaponry, and even tactics all originate from the Iranians. They've been a loyal proxy for Iran and its cause. The Houthis literally adopted Tehran's battle cry, "Death to the US, death to Israel," as their official slogan. However, the trouble with loyalty to a cause is that, more often than not, the cause will betray its followers. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. Thank you for watching, and Sağ ol.